imagine this. It's Friday night, you're just about to go to bed, and then you remember, oh shoot, I got the SAT tomorrow. So you run to your laptop, open it up, go to Google and search how to do good on the SAT. Maybe you read an article, heck, maybe you even do a practice problem. Then you think to yourself, this is good enough. Shut your laptop and call it a night. The next morning rolls around and you skip breakfast before going to the test center. You walk out feeling embarrassed. A week goes by and it's time to see your score. 970. If this is you, don't worry, because I was in the exact same spot a year ago when I was taking my SAT. And I think I've finally figured out how you can gamify the test. And in this 4-part series, I'm going to help your scores go from this to this. This series is going to be broken down into 2 videos for English and 2 videos for math, where I'm going to be going through every single type of question that could possibly be asked on the test, along with a personal tip that helped me and a practice problem, so you know exactly what to expect. And as someone who scored a 1550 on the SAT, the best way to prepare is to know what they're going to ask before they ask it. All right, enough of me yapping. Let's get straight to crushing the SAT. So a quick overview if you don't know, the SAT is broken down into 4 sections, 2 modules for English and 2 modules for math. Today, we're just going to be covering English, in which each module is 27 questions and 32 minutes each. Now for the SAT English, there's 4 main ideas of topics they cover. And in this video, we're going to go over the 2 main ones, which are craft and structure and information and ideas. Okay, so one of the main questions the SAT loves to ask is identifying the central idea and key supporting details of a passage. And my tip for these type of questions is the main idea is almost always hidden inside the text. You just got to find it. And when answering, you can always compare that main idea that you find to an answer choice that most aligns with it. And 9 times out of 10, that's your answer. So for each of these types of questions, I have a practice problem. Feel free to pause because I'm going to be going straight into the explanation. So for all the upcoming ones, just pause the video and try to answer it yourself. So this question's talking about 2 concepts that can be used to analyze narratives, and it's asking for what the main idea of the text is. And if you look at the line that talks about how he maintained that Fabula and Suzette are insufficient to completely describe a narrative, this would lead you to choosing answer A as the correct answer, because this line basically tells you that these 2 concepts are not the only 2 characteristics that can be used to analyze a narrative. And answer choice A is the only one that lines up with those. All right, so the next type of question that's asked is to identify the role of a sentence or paragraph and or understand the author's purpose. And my tip for these type of questions is to understand the audience or who the author is writing for. So this passage talks about a girl who likes reading, and it asks which choice best states the main purpose of the text. And if you read the last 2 sentences of the passage, it says, for all her enthusiasm, she had to admit that some of the bees had been hard going, but Francie was a reader. So option C talks about her determination. And in these 2 sentences, it basically talks about how she didn't like the books in the B section, but she was a reader, so she was determined to read them no matter what. And if you understand what the author was going for, these last 2 sentences are there just to show that she's determined to be reading these books even though she doesn't like them. So that takes you to option C, and all the other answer choices don't make sense. The next type of problem is comparing viewpoints or claims across 2 short passages. And my tip for this one is to understand the main idea of each text, which oftentimes is underlined in 1 or 2 of the texts. So in this problem, they're talking about the possible origins of tools in caves. Text 1 thinks they're from humans, and text 2 thinks they were formed naturally. And this question is asking how the author of text 2 would respond to the author of text 1 and that underlined sentence. And if you look at text 2, they talk about the conclusion of humans being inside the caves as premature. This would lead you to answer A because it talks about plausible connections because there's not enough evidence. And since they use the word premature, that means it could possibly happen. They just don't have enough proof yet. And answer A is the only one that suggests this possibility. The next type of question they ask is to draw logical conclusions that are not explicitly stated in the text. And my tip for this one is to not predict the future. In this question, they're talking about the origins of the pronunciation of the letter R in the Upland South. And the answer choice here would be A, because you're not talking about something that will happen as a result of something. You're talking about how that result occurred because of what you're given in the text. So here you want to work in chronological order, And answer choice A makes the most sense because it talks about how they developed the pronunciation of the letter R because of the fact that Scottish people moved to the upland south, and they took their pronunciation of the letter R and moved it to that region. Okay, another question similar to the main idea one is to select a sentence or detail that best supports a claim. And my tip for this one is to treat it like an equation. In this question, they talk about NFM, which is news finds me, and they're asking what sentence most directly supports the claim by the author. And you don't even have to come up with the claim because they literally give it to you in that last sentence, where they say that they did posit that NFM may reduce voting probability through an indirect effect. And going through the answer choices, this one is B, because if you understand the idea that they're asking, you can use this formula. Since NFM equals less voting and political knowledge equals more voting, and in answer choice B, NFM equals negative political knowledge. And since NFM equals negative political knowledge and political knowledge equals voting, we can posit that NFM equals negative voting. And this supports their claim that they said in the last part of the passage. Since the SAT doesn't have a science section like the ACT, they often put data interpretation questions inside the reading section. These include analyzing graphs, charts, and tables, and to connect textual and visual information. And my tip for these is that most of the answer choices have nothing to do with the actual chart. In this question, it's pretty obvious that the answer is B because that's the only answer choice that discusses expansion. And if you see the last column of the chart, that's talking about a percent increase in area. Answer choice D talks about a rate, which we're not talking about rates. Answer choice C talks about individual plants, which we're not talking about either. And answer choice A talks about suppression, which is not mentioned anywhere inside the table. So make sure you're actually understanding what the question's asking, and make sure that the data in the table matches exactly what is in the answer choice. Lastly, this type of question can easily lose students 50 or more points on their SAT, and it's the most simplest fix of them all. And these are words in context, aka vocab words. So these questions often ask you to determine the meaning of a word or phrase based on context in a sentence. And my tip for this one is to study this list of SAT vocab words. It literally has every single word you could possibly know. 70% of those words you probably already know or have heard of. And the rest 30%, just honestly scroll through them during class or whenever you're bored and just look at the definitions while you're taking a practice test, and it'll prime your brain to understand these words when they actually show up on the real test. Okay, so that about wraps up part 1 of this 4-part series of studying for the SAT. I hope you understood the types of questions that they ask and how to approach these problems, because I feel like that's the most valuable skill you could have on the SAT, is knowing how to approach the problems. If you found this video helpful, please consider subscribing. 95% of the people who watch my videos are not subscribed, and if I'm providing you value in any way, a like or a subscription would mean a lot. Don't forget to stay tuned for part 2, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.